From frontline to front bench. In this episode of Once a Warrior, Life After the Uniform, we sit down with Alastair Carns MP, UK Minister for Veterans and People, Lieutenant Colonel in the Royal Marines and now in the Reserves. We discuss his transition from military command to political representation of veterans, the challenges of life after service, and the UK government's effort to support those who have served. Join us for an insightful conversation on resilience, leadership, and the future of veteran care. Welcome to Once a Warrior, Life Beyond the Uniform. My name is David Johnson and I am the Veterans Commissioner for Northern Ireland. And this podcast is about giving the opportunity for veterans to tell their story, explain what service meant to them, and also what life has been like since they left the military. Absolutely delighted today on this special podcast to welcome the Minister for Veterans and People, MP Alastair Carns. Minister, absolutely delighted to be able to come.
It's great to be here, absolute privilege.
This is definitely a special edition of our fledgling podcast, so brilliant to have you on.
Well, I think it's great to be here, and anything we can do to get the message out and sort of champion the veterans' cause, and I'm all in.
Yeah,
so,
fantastic. Absolutely. Well, the obvious, we're going to start slightly differently. Normally we're starting with early life, but I think the obvious question most of our viewers are going to have: successful career in the military, probably opportunities to progress further up the rank structure, you leave it all to go into politics.
Yeah.
Describe that decision.
Well, so I was due to be a one-star brigadier. That was all set. And interestingly, I have watched really closely the war in Ukraine. And I think there's a change in the character and conflict. And I often describe it as a machine gun moment for the Army, a submarine moment for the Navy, and a jet engine moment for the Air Force. And I think the need for defence to change far faster, far quicker if we're going to win the next conflict we get involved in. So I recognise in a hierarchical structure like the military, it's very difficult to change from within. I've worked for 3 sector states for defence in the past, and I realise how you actually change stuff, and it's actually from politics back in.
Yeah.
So I left to deliver more change for defence.
Okay. And how do you think your time in the military has prepared you for now the role you have within politics?
Yeah, well, I think the military is a fantastic organisation, isn't it? I mean, you'll know, Dave, from your time, and a lot of the viewers will understand when you join the military, you're a very different person to when you come out of it. Mm-hmm. And actually, when you join it by the end of basic training, you're a very different person. Yeah. You know, I went in there as a bit of a rogue as a youngster, and it sorted me out, gave me boundaries, gave me focus, and changed me completely. Add on 24 years to that and multiple tours all over the world. And I think it's made me a much better person. But importantly, I'm a firm believer you've got to be able to follow before you can lead. And working my way up through the ranks from a young Marine all the way to Colonel has given me the ability to work out what's good, bad and the ugly, and then to develop my leadership skills.
Yeah. Earlier on in the car, you mentioned a story when you were campaigning in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you'd mind sharing that story.
So I went from being in the military. I mean, it's a really interesting story. So I'm a relatively junior veteran in the grand scheme of things. You know, I've only left for, I've only been outside now just under a year, only last April. And when I left the military in 3 days, and then I went to Birmingham, and I was met in the car by a woman who was going to run the campaign. She's like, "Hey, we're going to run your campaign." Mm-hmm. I was like, "Fantastic! I'm good at running campaigns. I've done quite a few around the world." She's like, "No, it's a very different campaign," which was quite amusing. And then I was knocking on the doors, canvassing, speaking to people, getting the feel from Selly Oak, which is my constituency. Mm-hmm. And one of the individuals said, "Hey, I know I've heard about you. You've been parachuted into this area." And I turned around and said, "Hey, buddy, last time I parachuted somewhere, the reception was much worse." And, we got a great laugh. And we had a good 5-10 minute chat, probably too long when everyone was trying to usher me on. But we had a really good discussion about veterans, about the military, about Selly Oak. And, I think we won them over time. Yeah,
very good. It's obviously a completely different environment, military into politics. What have you found maybe your biggest challenge, or what have you found different than you expected now that you're in the political arena?
I think it's breadth of portfolio. So in the military, I was in relatively specialist bits of where it was quite focused, relatively narrow, broad geographical area, broad remit, but 24 years of being trained what to do, and you were very clear. It was very clear your objectives and your aims. you also work with a very, and whether we like it or not in the military, you actually work with a very narrow section of society, all relatively trained the same, you're brought up the same, you're in the same units, you think the same, and by doing that you create unity of effort, which is really good for teamwork and delivery. When you come into politics, it's really broad. Like immediately it broadens out. It's broad both in the people you're dealing with, everyone from some of the MPs who are big business all the way through to school teachers to councillors, and that's a fantastic mix and a great example of democracy. But also the range of issues you're dealing with, everything from bins, rubbish, lampposts, all the way through to my ministerial portfolio, 1.9 million veterans, £1 billion house deals, all the way through to defence capability, and then everything in between. And so trying to focus on what you can actually get after is a real challenge.
So politicians, we're in Northern Ireland, and there's probably quite a variety of views on politicians, whether they're worthy of their pay packet or not, as the case may be. In terms of you've moved into that sphere, you're now in politics, you're now elected, which I sometimes feel is the ultimate where people put their faith and trust in you. Did you find that humbling, that actually people were prepared to go to a ballot box and actually vote for you?
I was absolutely amazed at the democratic process. So I went to the count in sort of the centre of Birmingham, and I was really, really impressed to see democracy in action. It's really, really impressive to see, still on tickets, people counting out tickets. I don't know, it's where I recommend anyone going to see it, because it gives you real faith in the democratic system, and it's a real honour and a privilege for people to vote. I do think, after being an MP for a relatively short period of time, that I haven't met an MP who is not trying to do the right thing. They all have their own way of getting there. They have their own right thing, their own focus. But every MP I've met is trying to do the very best for both their constituency and the country. Now, those views will differ depending on where you sit in the country. But the reality is there are some amazing people in politics working exceptionally hard. I mean, you're talking 6, if not 7 days a week to try and spread themselves pretty thin across a really broad portfolio. And it's deeply impressive, actually.
I think in some ways it's the ultimate job to have, is to be entrusted with by people, to go on their behalf and try and affect policy and government. Like, it's, as you say, democracy in action, and of course, thinking of the armed forces over the years, without the sacrifice and service of armed forces in our nation's history, we may not have the privilege and the ability to actually vote.
Such a valid point. I think there's a couple of issues here. Today's society, I think, we need to actively remind our collective society that democracy, the freedoms that we have today, are not free. Like they were. I mean, we're in this house here. Eisenhower stayed in the house. We just had a tour, which was amazing. They were here before D-Day. The reason we have all of the freedoms, the reason we have democracy, the reason we have the right to self-determination and the right of free speech is because of the military has protected those freedoms. Now, as time goes on and it becomes less relevant, I think some people think that it's a given right to have the freedoms. Well, no. The only anomaly in the last 65 years, whether we like it or not, speak to any military historian, is the lack of a major conflict. That is the anomaly. And at some point in time, we're going to have to fight for those freedoms again. That could be in cyberspace all the way through to boots on the ground. And I think we forget that at our peril.
No, I think it's a point well made. So you're elected, and then very quickly find yourself as the Minister for Veterans and People. Was that a surprise that sort of you find yourself on the front benches so soon?
I think there's 2 or 3 of us, and I think it's the first time it's happened in history where we've been elected and then straight into a ministerial position. But I've got what I would say is I've got 24 years of military experience. I've done 5 tours of Afghanistan, the Arabian Gulf, Northern Ireland. I've been here and served, and a multitude of different operations. So I know the military really well. I've worked in MOD, I've worked for Secretary of State. So I've got quite a good pedigree in that space. And I've worked really hard in the last several months to really understand the veteran space and work out where we can deliver institutional change that will change the whole system to do better for our veterans and those that have sacrificed so much.
Well, that leads on nicely to what I was next going to ask. So you've now been in how long have you actually been the Minister? So
about 8, just coming up for 8 months.
So still very much new, trying to find your way around, understand the system. Can you point to, if there's any one specific challenge you could summarise the difficulties facing veterans currently in the UK. Is there anything particular you could point to?
Yeah, I mean, if I was to be bold, I would say that governments in the past have never taken responsibility for looking after their veterans. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is as simple as that. With the last government started by creating the Office for Veterans Affairs. It's a step in the right direction. But when you look below that, there is no, and it's a word I've used in the military a lot, there's no institutional resilience. Mm-hmm. What do I mean by that? If Labour was to be removed, if I were to be removed, if the Conservatives were to be removed, what's left? Well, at the moment, you'll have this very thin crust of the Office for Veterans Affairs, and there's nothing below. What we've got to do as we move forward is create a really refined and institutionally resilient structure that will not change too much given the global affairs or indeed political change. And therefore, veterans as a whole will have a standard set of support mechanisms in place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have been in Northern Ireland, obviously visiting various stakeholders. How have you enjoyed your trip here?
It's been great. It's been fantastic. As I said, I served here in 2003-04. Came on an up-banner tour with the Marines. I've only been back once since on a stag do into Belfast, which was equally, which was slightly different, but amazing.
Equally as memorable?
Probably. And then, to come back now has been brilliant. I mean, it's been a fantastic visit put on by yourself and your team, and they're doing a great job, but also the Veterans Welfare Service and the teams and the outreach teams that you have are doing an amazing job. And the bit I really enjoy is meeting the veterans and getting the grassroots feel of what's working, what isn't, and working out how we can help. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, there's a bit of nuance here in Northern Ireland, given some of the security concerns. Mm-hmm. But there's also all the themes that we're picking up here in Wales and Scotland and England pretty much are exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to that institutional resilience, that postcode lottery, depending on where you live, depending on what service you get. Yeah. And we've got to solidify that, cement it, and make sure that there's a set standard, and the government recognises and other government departments recognise they have a duty of care to those that have sacrificed so much. Yeah, no, that's so important. So I've been fortunate enough to have some meetings with you and various people in your office over in London, which was an experience getting in there. was interesting. Yeah. And then obviously, today you've been here, and I think the feedback people have given me is they can really see your passion, they can really see your desire to make change and to affect change. Obviously, we hope you don't lose that when you get it more into the institution that is our local, our government politics. But clearly that is, you're motivated to try and make change, to make life better for veterans in the United Kingdom. I think it's really important that ministers focus what only ministers can do. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to get chased down into a really small, and we've got to do that. We've got to do that in a lot of cases. But we've got to focus on the big change that may not deliver in the next 6, 12, 18 months, but in the next 3 to 4 to 5 years will deliver significant change. Mm-hmm. And that's where I go back to those structures that we need to put in place to ensure that there's a level of accountability, there's terms of reference, people are working to something, there's data capture, there's ability to analyse that data, and the ability to deliver strategy and support to our veterans in a consolidated but focused manner. So it's really important.
So just sort of one question on this, and then we'll move on to the sort of the military career. In terms of, you mentioned the nuances in Northern Ireland, I think it would be difficult to have a podcast like this and not kind of the elephant in the room regarding sort of legacy and the challenges that we face. I appreciate you can't go into a whole pile of detail on that, but anything you can sort of allude to that and understanding of veterans?
David, I think it's a really important point. And what really annoys me as a veteran who served in various bits of the military, has served in Northern Ireland, has served all over the world, is that we forget the context. Mm-hmm. The context is everything here. Yeah. There were major explosions in every major city across the UK and Northern Ireland. There were assassination programs, and on the other side there were soldiers here, sailors and airmen trying to hold the peace. Mm-hmm. There was violence everywhere and that context is often lost when we review and look back. Yeah. And I think there's a real requirement for balance here. Yeah. And if we're not balanced, then we skew the scales either way. Yeah. And I always try and remind colleagues of the shields on the wall in the House, of where there were 3, I think, MPs assassinated over their time, and war was ever present. We were stopping or trying to stop civil war here in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And I think that's often lost. The reality is Northern Ireland, there were more security people involved in the security services killed than Iraq and Afghanistan put together.
Yeah, that I think is a really key point, Minister, because that gets
lost.
lost.
It's 100 miles away.
Yeah.
And so people forget that.
Yeah.
It's like, the amount of attention Afghanistan and Iraq's got. Think of what Banner and what went before and came after. It was on a scale that is incomprehensible today.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to remember that
Yeah.
on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, it's a complicated issue. From my point of view as a Veterans Commissioner, it's a nettle that needs to be grasped by the Government of Westminster, and certainly I'm satisfied you're willing to grasp it and just deal with what is a very complex
Well, I'm helping
situation.
to grasp it, and what I would say is, as a veteran myself who's been involved in a significant amount of combat in my time, I know the context of what a soldier is put through when he is faced with a life or death scenario.
Yeah, no, I think that's...
I think it's really important to remind people of that.
Yeah, okay. So, pivoting a little bit now to the military, what made you join the Royal Marines originally you joined?
Yeah, so I joined the Marines at 19 straight out of school. I always wanted to be in the armed forces in some way, shape or form. And I wanted to be either in the parachute regiment or the Marines. Interestingly, I tried to join. I went through my potential officers course, my Admiral interview board to join the Marines as an officer, but I failed on colour vision.
Right.
And so I went back and they said, no, you're good enough to be an officer, why don't you try and join the army? So I went, did my potential officers course for the paras, passed that, went to do my pre-RCB, which I think is before you went to Sandhurst. And I failed my medical because I've got a 16-inch titanium pin in my right leg. So I went back to the career office, went to a different career office and joined as a Marine.
There we are.
And then got in. And there was an old doctor who used to be in the 51st Highland Division, and he shook my leg a bit, put some colours. I'd learnt the colour code on the book, and so
and you got it.
Yeah, so I got in, and that was me, gone.
Yeah. Well, we'll edit out the bit about passing the colour code test. I didn't actually realise we're actually more in common. I have a pin on that right leg from a football injury.
Oh, same, 16-inch. Yeah.
And again in Iraq, actually, there was about 2 days at Chilwell been mobilised, where they were hem in hand, because like aircraft metal effectively, and they were worried about the heat.
Yeah.
And they're saying, but it might expand in the heat. It's like,
Well, when I did this, the doctor said to me, "Hey, don't do anything dangerous as you go on. No parachuting, no motorbikes, because if you break it with the pin in it."
Well, that was the issue that they were concerned about.
Got it, doc, and then went and joined the Marines.
Away you went. Oh, cool. Any memorable sort of moments in training? Any moments where you kind of thought, "Is this for me?" Or were you kind of, "I'm loving this.
Absolutely,
I'm pushing through the pain."
I absolutely loved it. I loved it so much. I did the commander course twice. I did it once as a Marine, and then 4 years later, after a couple of tours of Arabian Gulf, I went back and did it as an officer, the whole thing again. So I did a 32 weeks training to commander training, and then went back and did a whole year as an officer.
In Northern Ireland, we would say, "Are you wise?"
I know.
Okay.
And then did that, and then I did a year. That's what I did. I came out, was Troop Commander, 4-5 Commander, and deployed out here in Banner, which was brilliant. And then I went and do my mountain leader to become part of the Mountain Cold Weather Warfare Cadre, which is another 9-month course to forward reconnaissance and Norway, training up troops in Norway and all that sort of stuff, which was amazing.
Yeah. So you alluded to some of the places you'd served and just the ones you're able to talk about. Obviously, I mean, you mentioned Afghanistan, numerous tours of Afghanistan, and where else were you able to talk about?
So I've done Arabian Gulf boardings in the Gulf in Arabian Gulf, in Northern Ireland. Been to all over Africa. I've been all over the Middle East. But primarily 5 tours in Afghanistan and lots of other bits and bobs.
And you received a military cross for the service in Afghanistan?
I got a mention in dispatches in my first tour. I then got a military cross, and then I got a distinguished service order and an OBE later on.
Yeah. Okay. I was thinking of giving you your full title at the start of the podcast, but it was like, I could just name the alphabet.
It'll bore everyone.
From A to Z, and I'll cover all the correct ones. But obviously a very impressive.
I had I look back in 24 years. I had the most amazing career. I loved operations. I kept going back, kept volunteering to go back, because on operations there's no bureaucracy. It's all about getting the job done, and I really enjoyed it. And I was with the most amazing team, the best of Britain. Ranging from your medevac pilots, who I think you've had in here before, your medics, all the way through to the very top of the tree when it comes to sort of specialist elements within defence, and I've loved it. It's been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, okay. In terms of any funny stories, anything happened that would maybe when you get together with your buddies, you just fall about laughing because of something? Maybe it's a serious situation often, but something happens that you just die about laughing. Anything spring to mind?
We often, when we get together with the guys that I've served with, we tend to take a really serious situation that was incredibly intense at the time, and then take the mick out of each other. So we did one operation where we were basically had to interdict. It was a massive mountain canyon, and the Taliban had a cave on top of it with a recoilless rifle and about 16 enemy. And then they had this quick reaction force who used to come up and resupply them if we ever tested them. We test them all the time to try and shut down the IEDs coming north into Helmand. And then we planned an operation where we went up and put an observation post level with the cave and coordinated a offensive support ambush. It was javelin strike, mortars, aircraft that all hit at once, blew the cave up and neutralised some of the target. And then we went up and fought up this mountain. This was a big old mountain. It was, it's a pretty big old feat. And then got in amongst the caves and had to go in and clear and flush everyone out. And that was an intense, you're talking significant amount of enemy on a mountain, going up a mountain. Pretty intense firefights, quite a few close shaves and casualties and whatever else. But we tend to turn that into a funny story and take the mick out of each other, usually over a couple of beers. It's just great when you reminisce with the guys, and this goes back to this veterans portfolio. As you find that when you're with your buddies, when we're together, you tell me a couple of stories from when you're in the military and back and forth. It's a good way to discuss, reminisce, heal, and enjoy each other's company.
Yeah. I think it is such an important part of, even today you're at a roadshow, for instance, and you have a diversity. You have younger guys and gals, as I call them, maybe Iraq, Afghanistan, and then you've got the guys coming in, 70s and 80s, who have served. But there's that camaraderie and that respect, no matter the age. When you've wore the uniform and served, then there is that connection, and that's powerful in life.
Yeah, well, I think you can understand it, can you? If you've been there and done a bit of it, then you can understand it. I mean, I came to Northern Ireland in 2003, so it was after the main troubles. But by being in combat and being on both sides of it, you can see it, you can relate to it, and therefore you understand it. I always say being in combat's the last race to run, and you'll never be able to tell how someone will cope until they've been in it. And I've seen people absolutely excel, and I've seen others who are less willing. I don't hold anything against them. It's some cases that's the way the line falls, and it's interesting to see as you go through your career.
Yeah. If there's one word to describe your military service, what would you say?
Enjoyable.
Good one. Good one.
Loved it. Yeah. Genuinely, I mean, I've got a couple, kids and whatever else, and I'd recommend joining up to all of them. Maketh the man, and then and gives you just a different set of principles and drive and determination. And you meet amazing people, and you see amazing places. You see some horrendous stuff, and you go through the ups and downs. But actually, on reflection, I wouldn't change any of it at all. But I have been lucky.
So one of the challenges, and we've discussed this just casually, is around military families, and it can be difficult for families, be it one of the parents, on operations, or there's the constant moving around and things like that. I don't think there's any easy answer to that, because the nature of the job will take that person away from their family. But I think it's something you're certainly conscious of in terms of the challenge there is to families.
Well, I mean, it's a really interesting point, and it's so important. I'm a firm believer behind every strong man or woman, there's a strong partner behind them. Yeah. And it takes its toll. I mean, it's taken my personal toll. I think I said to you earlier, I was at my daughter's 21st, and I think I've probably only seen her for 2 years out of the 21.
Which is crazy in some ways. It's absolutely crazy.
It's absolutely madness. And then I also find that when people delve into their work and you become 5 consistent almost Afghanistan tours and everything thrown in between, you become so focused, you often forget, and you see such deprivation as well.
Yeah.
You see such hardship. It's like, hey, you know what? Don't come on, guys, don't moan. You've seen all of this. When in reality, you need to be far more empathetic, far more caring when you're serving.
Yeah.
And then, as within a veterans space, but also a charitable sector, we must remember and protect the families, because the trauma they go through is just as bad as the trauma the individual in the armed forces.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Minister. And it was even, I think, a couple of times today, people mentioned that to us, that we normally tend to talk about the veterans, but there is the family out there as well. Even when veterans pass, their families are 100%. Still living with the pain and the challenges they've been through.
I think people talk about, oh, did you serve? The reality is the whole family serves.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think that, it's not just about the individual serving, the whole family serves. The kids serve, the wife or the partner serves, even in some cases, extended family and friends serve, because they go through all that pain with you. And when you're in for the amount of time, or the amount of time I've been away, they pay the price. And it often takes the ultimate price. Yeah. The key is to stay amicable as you move through the system. Yeah.
So how does being an MP compare to being a military leader? What are the similarities and what are the differences?
I always say, the principles of leadership are the same. Number one, be yourself. Never ask anyone to do something you wouldn't want to do yourself. One of the reasons I got into politics is you can stand on the sideline and shout and heckle, or you can get in the ring and join in. And so, I give it a shot, because I thought if other people can do it, then so can I, and I can make some change. So from my perspective is, you need to change a bit of your leadership style. So for example, I said, we live in a silo in the military in some cases. My empathy levels have expanded like 120%. Yeah. Because you're dealing with everything from an individual who come and cry to you and say, hey, listen, I'm going to be made homeless tomorrow if you don't sort out the housing in the council, all the way through to, a hospice where people need that hospice stay open to give them the end-of-life care as they go through. Yeah. And that really opens your eyes, because in the military, you're pretty focused on and you're a really narrow section of society. Yeah. So I've really benefited as much as hopefully people have helping out.
Well, I think there's no doubt from the veterans I spoke to today, and others, I'm sure it's the same right across the UK. I think they're, in some ways, they admire you. You've been willing to, if you like, leave that military environment where you're probably comfortable in the sense that you were rising through the ranks, as it were. Nice, easy career ahead of you in many respects, but you've set that aside to actually step into the world of politics, which is pretty unforgiving at times, as I'm sure you know. Yeah. But to try and do your bit and make a change and make a difference, which I think is admirable.
Well, people turn around to me and say, "Hey, Al, are you enjoying it?" And I say, "No, I enjoy being in the military." Yeah. I love being in the military, surrounded by my mates. It was, going overseas with my mates, really focused, national security, right at the top of the tree, privileged insight and understanding to everything. That's why I enjoyed. And I always say to people, ask me in 5 years whether I enjoyed it, because I do absolutely enjoy it, but I enjoy it when we deliver that bits of change. When you take that woman that I mentioned earlier that is going to be made homeless, and you've given her a house, or you've sorted out accommodation, all the way through to when you look a veteran in the eye and go, hey, I will sort out your pension claim. And above and beyond that, we'll restructure the whole thing to ensure that long after me and you are gone, there's something in place where the government has to take responsibility for its veterans, and that's what Labour is absolutely committed to doing. Yeah.
So as we come to an end on this sort of special edition of our podcast, you obviously work with myself here as a Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner, Susie Hamilton up in Scotland, James Phillips down in Wales. How important do you see the role of the commissioners in their different devolved areas, and sort of being that link sort of from you to the ground, if you like?
Yeah, it's something I think is really important. When I came in, I'll be really honest, so as a military man stepping out into politics, into this job, I didn't even know the commissioners existed. And it's really interesting. And as I've come into the job, I've realised the valuable nature of it, and the fact that you've got a really good feel in the grassroots of what's good, the bad and the ugly in the system, and you can feed that back into me, and then I can try and help you and help the devolved administration deliver it. Or if not, learn best practice from the devolved administrations down into Westminster as well, and we share those ideas. And guess what? There neither be a right or wrong because of some of the nuances of the different areas we're in, but we can all get collectively stronger by communicating and educating. And I think that's the relationship we've got is fantastic. It's the same with the other commissioners. And I hope, it just goes from strength to strength and we make life better for veterans here in Northern Ireland. And one thing I would like to say before the end of the podcast is, I've served in Northern Ireland. I've done 24 years. I've absolutely got the back of veterans here in Northern Ireland. And I'm willing to support them as best as I can from Westminster, and of course with your sage counsel as we move forward.
Okay, no, certainly I appreciate that, and I know that many veterans watching this will definitely appreciate those.
And I know comments. What a .5 Dushka machine gun does.
Point taken. Point taken. So last question then. 5 years out, what is Al Carns doing?
I'll be running for re-election in Birmingham Selly. 5 years out, what I want to have looked back in, I want to have created an institutionally resilient structure for veterans in the UK collectively, that if I was to be removed, if Labour was to go, that structure will stay in place and veterans will get better service across the other government departments. But importantly, it will be standardised. Now we'll never achieve a total of that. The second one is to understand where all of our veterans are. And I hate to say, we've got to look at this from an operational perspective. If we need to press the red button to mobilise our veterans, specifically those under 55, we could mobilise them at a time of need. And given the geopolitical situation we're in now, it's a very important pool of resource. Interesting, under 55, we have 480,000 veterans in the UK.
Under 55.
So when we talk about the army being 70,000 or reserve being 30, 40,000, you've then got 480 to 90,000 under 55 veterans. Now, I'm not saying you'd recall them all, but my point being...
They're trained, they understand the military, they understand
and once you,
combat, many of them.
I think you said this to me earlier, once you serve, you always serve.
Yeah.
You never leave service until the day you die.
Yeah.
Whether that be memories, physical impact, psychological impact, your families, the friends you keep, the mindset you have, you serve all the way through life.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to remember.
That's okay. But I think this is going to be the first edition, because there's going to be another one hopefully sometime in the future. But certainly from my point of view, people have often asked me after I've met you, what do you think of the Minister of Veterans and People? And my answer is usually twofold. No, definitely not. The first one is tall. That was okay. There was that, but there was really two things. The first thing was, well, look, his military service speaks for itself. Just look at his military CV, and that tells you all you need to know about his life as a soldier, or wrong, not a soldier, Royal Marine, better get that right. Rachel in the office had me well warned to remember.
Senior service,
Royal
David,
Marines
senior
are
service.
not, I know if I've heard, yes, if I've never heard that before. But there's, that speaks for itself. But secondly, I'll be able to say to him, look, I honestly believe he gets it. I honestly, he really understands the challenges facing veterans and their families, and then the extra of Northern Ireland, he gets it. And that's kind of been my summary of our exchanges on our various meetings, that the Minister gets what veterans are going
What I'd throw back to David is hold me to account. Let's see what we can actually deliver. So, let's come back, let's have a regular update, come back, let's speak to your viewers on this podcast, and let's test and adjust. It will take time.
Yeah.
But let's hold us to account, see what we actually deliver. Because there's no point delivering superficial sticking plasters. This is about a restructure of the system. Yeah.
Listen, that's a fantastic place to end. Minister, I really appreciate you coming in.
Appreciate it.
And look forward to edition 2 when it comes out.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.